Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we'll be sharing a story that isn't about a perfect wedding day, but rather about a journey that reveals things you may not have expected. Imagine, if you will, attending your granddaughter's wedding. A day that should be full of love, joy, and celebration. A day that should warm your heart whenever you think about it. But what if it turned out to be the day you discovered just how your family really sees you? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe only if you truly appreciate what I'm doing here. And don't forget to comment below with where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has traveled. Now go ahead and turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soothing background noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. That morning, I took extra time to prepare. At 65, I'm not one to obsess over my appearance, but I wanted to look my best. I chose a pale blue dress, the same color that my late husband James had always loved. I styled my silver hair carefully and spritzed on the perfume he had given me for our last anniversary before cancer took him 3 years ago. "You look beautiful, Eleanor," I whispered to my reflection, imagining James's voice as if he were still beside me. I could almost feel him there, comforting me with his words, reminding me that he would always be proud of me. The ceremony at St. Mark's Church was beautiful. My granddaughter Emily looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her face glowing with happiness. My son Thomas escorted her proudly, and even my daughter-in-law Sophia seemed genuinely moved. For a moment, everything felt right. The day was exactly how I'd imagined it would be. But then at the reception, everything changed. When I entered the grand ballroom at the Westbrook Hotel, I made my way toward the check-in table where guests were collecting their name tags. The young woman behind the table smiled warmly as she rifled through the alphabetized cards. "Here you are, Mrs. Edwards," she said cheerfully, handing me my name tag. I glanced down, expecting to see Eleanor Edwards, grandmother of the bride. Instead, in elegant script, the name tag read, "The old lady who will pay for everything, my gal." My hand froze midair. Surely this is a mistake, I thought to myself. "Is something wrong?" the young woman asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile. "It seems there's been a mix-up with my name tag," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned over to take a look. Her eyes widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me check for another one." "No, it's fine," I quickly replied, not wanting to cause a scene. "I'll talk to my family about it." I pinned the offensive tag to my dress and walked into the ballroom. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks, the humiliation settling in as I walked through the crowd. I couldn't stop thinking, had Emily approved this? Thomas? Sophia? Did they think this was funny? Throughout the cocktail hour, I tried to enjoy myself speaking with guests who either didn't notice my name tag or were too polite to comment on it. But then, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "Did you see the grandmother's name tag?" One person whispered, snickering. Sophia's voice floated over. "We thought it would be hilarious," she said. Another voice chimed in. "Apparently, she's their personal ATM." I quickly moved away, my hands trembling. Just then, Thomas spotted me and waved me over to a group of well-dressed guests. "Mom," he called, his voice carrying across the room. "Come meet the Andersons. Dad used to golf with Bill." Reluctantly, I made my way over, and Bill Anderson, someone I vaguely recognized from my late husband's business circles, stood up to greet me. "Mom, this is Bill and Martha Anderson," Thomas said with a laugh. "Mom, our walking bank account." Martha Anderson's smile faltered as she glanced at my name tag. Bill looked uncomfortable. "Alice Edwards," I said firmly, extending my hand. "James's widow." "Of course," Bill said kindly. "James spoke of you often. He was very proud of you." The conversation continued, but I hardly heard it. When the Andersons moved on, I pulled Thomas aside. "What is this about?" I asked, pointing to my name tag. Thomas laughed. "Oh, Mom, don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. Everyone knows you're the one with the deep pockets since Dad left you everything. It's humiliating, I said quietly. Oh, please, he rolled his eyes. Lighten up. It's a party. Before I could respond, Sophia appeared radiant in her mother of the bride dress. There you are, Eleanor. Has Thomas been introducing you around? We want everyone to know who's responsible for this gorgeous wedding. She winked, and the two of them shared a laugh. I excused myself, heading toward the restroom. I needed a moment alone to gather myself. As I retreated to the restroom, my mind raced. The sting of the name tag, the whispers, the casual disregard, it all weighed on me. The hurt wasn't just about the joke. It was about how it reflected how little they truly saw me. I had always believed family celebrations should be full of warmth and respect. But here I was at my own granddaughter's wedding, feeling like a joke. A walking paycheck. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to calm my nerves. The bathroom was empty, but I could hear muffled laughter and chatter from the ballroom just outside the door. It was as though the world around me continued on blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. When I stepped out of the restroom, my hand instinctively went to adjust the name tag again. It felt heavier now, like a weight that was suffocating me. I took a deep breath and walked back into the main room, determined not to let anyone see just how shaken I was. The evening passed in a haze. I tried my best to engage in small talk with other guests, but every conversation felt like it was happening from a distance. I couldn't stop thinking about the name tag, how it had reduced me to a punchline. And then there were the other comments I overheard, the ones that were worse than the name tag itself. There she is, the ATM. Someone muttered under their breath, glancing toward me with a smirk. Just look at her, so sweet and rich, always there to pay for everything. I winced, but didn't respond. I couldn't. What was there to say? I felt so small, so insignificant, and yet, in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't just an ATM. I wasn't just the one with deep pockets. I was Eleanor Edwards James' widow, a woman with a lifetime of experiences and love to give. But they didn't see that. As the evening went on, I made my way to the bar, hoping to find some solace in a quiet corner. I wasn't expecting anything special. But when I reached the bar, a familiar face greeted me. Eleanor, how are you? It was Martin Reynolds, my late husband's attorney. He looked at me with a concerned expression, his gaze flicking to the name tag on my chest. Martin, I replied, forcing a smile. I'm fine, just enjoying the evening. Martin looked at me closely, his expression softening. I'm sure you are, but you don't look fine. His voice dropped, as if to keep the conversation private. Listen, I know this may not be the right time, but I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Can we go somewhere quiet? I nodded, and we moved toward a secluded corner of the ballroom, away from the noise and the prying eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to be revealed. Eleanor, I need to tell you something that I've kept quiet about. Something James asked me to keep confidential, Martin began. His tone was serious, almost too serious for a wedding. I could tell this wasn't just idle chatter. I glanced down at the name tag again. It was almost as though it had come to life, mocking me. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what Martin had to say, but I knew it was something I had to hear. James. Before he passed, he added something to his will. Martin continued, taking a deep breath. A codicil. He insisted that I not tell you unless it became absolutely necessary, and unfortunately, Eleanor, I think it's time. I blinked, confused. A codicil? What do you mean? Martin looked around briefly, ensuring no one was eavesdropping. James put in a clause that if any of his descendants publicly humiliates you, if they treat you with disrespect, they forfeit their share of his estate. My heart skipped a beat, what I breathed the weight of his words sinking in. The inheritance, Martin clarified. Everything James left behind. If anyone disrespects you, if they make you feel small or belittled in front of others, they forfeit it all. James was very protective of you. He wanted to make sure you were treated with love and respect, not just because of his money, but because of who you are. I could barely breathe. My mind was spinning. The realization of what Martin was saying hit me like a tidal wave. James had known. He had anticipated this. But why hadn't he told me sooner? I never told you, because James didn't want it to come to this, Martin continued softly. He believed that they would treat you well because they loved you, not because they feared losing money. He never wanted you to feel like a pawn in their game. I looked back toward the ballroom, where my family was laughing and celebrating, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. In that moment, everything changed. "What do you want to do?" Eleanor Martin asked, his voice gentle, offering me space to decide. I glanced back at him, my hands trembling slightly. But now, instead of feeling humiliated, I felt something different stir inside me, a quiet strength. "I want to see just how far they'll go," I said, my voice steady. I folded the codicil carefully and handed it back to Martin. "I'll deal with this, but I need to see the truth for myself. I need to know what they're really after." I straightened up and made my way back to the ballroom, my heart pounding, but now with a sense of purpose. The name tag still hung there, heavy against my chest, but I no longer felt the same shame I had before. Now I was determined. The next morning, I sat alone at the kitchen table, still wearing my bathrobe, staring at the name tag that I had placed in front of me. The elegant script mocked me. "The old lady who will pay for everything." I traced the letters with my fingertip, feeling the sting of humiliation all over again. How had it come to this? As I sat there, the quiet of the house was almost suffocating. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a soft light over the empty room. I closed my eyes and let the silence wash over me, as if trying to block out the memory of last night. James would have been furious if he had seen what happened. He had a rare temper, but it was formidable when it came to people disrespecting those he loved. And yet in some ways, I wondered if I had been blind to the way things had shifted within my own family long before last night. "They've changed," I whispered to the empty room as if James could hear me. Or maybe they were always this way, and I just didn't want to see it. I got up from the table and walked to the living room, drawn to the large family portrait above the fireplace. It was taken 5 years ago, on our 40th anniversary. James sat in the center, still robust, despite the early signs of the illness that would eventually take him from me. I stood beside him, my hand resting on his shoulder. Thomas and Sophia flanked us, and Emily and her brother Michael, then teenagers, stood in front. We looked happy. We looked like a family. But when exactly had things changed? I lingered on the thought as I made my morning tea, the question gnawing at me. Perhaps it had been gradual, so subtle that I hadn't noticed the erosion of respect until it was too late. The first clear memory I had came just 6 months after James's funeral. Thomas and Sophia had invited me to dinner, a rare occurrence in itself. They were unusually attentive that evening, asking about my well-being, reminiscing about James. Over dessert, they finally broached the real reason for the invitation. "Mom," Thomas said, refilling my wine glass, "Sophia and I have been thinking about remodeling the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just updating the appliances, new countertops, that sort of thing." "That sounds lovely," I replied, oblivious to what was coming. I had always been the kind of person who believed in helping family, especially when it came to their needs. The thing is, Sophia continued smoothly with college tuition for the kids, and everything else were a bit stretched right now. I remembered the pause, the expectant look in their eyes. "Are you asking me for money?" "We're not asking," Thomas quickly interjected. "It's just that, well, Dad left you quite comfortable. and we thought maybe you'd want to help out the family." It was at that moment I realized what was happening. I ended up writing them a check for $30,000 that evening. Looking back, that was the beginning. Small requests turned into larger ones. A kitchen remodel became a full home renovation. Tuition assistance became luxury cars for both Emily and Michael when they turned 18. Family vacations became expected with the unspoken expectation that I would foot the bill. The phone rang, pulling me back from the past. I hadn't even noticed it until the second ring, but I saw it was Sophia. "Alice. Are you home?" she asked, her voice syrupy, sweet. "I've been trying to reach you on your cell." "I'm home," I replied, surprised that I had missed the calls. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she said quickly. "Thomas and I just wanted to thank you for everything. Yesterday was wonderful, wasn't it?" "It was lovely," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Jennifer and Mark are so grateful for your generosity," she continued. "They couldn't have had such a wonderful wedding without you." I closed my eyes, remembering the $45,000 check I had written for the venue and catering. I was happy to help, but the constant stream of requests was beginning to wear me down. Actually, Sophia continued her tone, taking on that familiar quality I had come to recognize. That's partly why I'm calling. I could already tell where this was going. Mark's parents were supposed to pay for the honeymoon, but his father's business has been struggling, and they've had to back out. Jennifer is just devastated. I could feel the pressure mounting, and I knew what was coming next. "We were wondering if you might be able to help Sophia," said the words coming out smoothly, almost as if she were reciting them from a script. "They've got their hearts set on 2 weeks in Bali. Of course, Thomas and I would contribute, but we've already spent so much on the wedding." I gripped the phone tightly, my grip tightening with every word she spoke. "I'll think about it," I said, surprising both of us with my non-committal response. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh well, they need to book soon to get the best rates," Sophia added, trying to keep the pressure on. "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll let you know tomorrow." When I hung up, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a box of financial records that had accumulated over the years. As I sat on the floor, sifting through old bank statements and canceled checks, the evidence of my financial support for Thomas and Sophia's lifestyle was overwhelming. Over the past 3 years, I had given them nearly $250,000. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. When I opened it, I saw Michael standing on the porch, looking a little nervous. "Grandma," he asked, stepping inside. At 21, he was tall and had the same kind eyes James had. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired after yesterday." "Can I sit with you for a bit?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded and led him to the kitchen where I began making tea. Michael had always been different from the rest of the family. He was more thoughtful, less fixated on appearances and status. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday," he said, sitting down at the table. "The name tag. The way everyone was talking. It wasn't right." I felt a lump form in my throat. "You noticed?" "Of course I noticed," he said, looking down. "So did a lot of people. I should have said something." I patted his hand gently. "It's not your responsibility to correct your parents, Michael, but it is mine to stand up for what's right." Michael hesitated, then looked up at me. "Grandma, I think things have changed since Grandpa passed. Or maybe I just didn't see it before, but all they talk about is money. Your money specifically." I froze, staring at him. "What do you mean?" He shifted in his seat. "Last week I overheard them talking about your house. Dad said it was too big for one person and that they could help you downsize." I felt sick to my stomach. My home, the place where James and I had built our life together, was no longer a sanctuary in their eyes. It was just a piece of property to be sold. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me as I absorbed Michael's words. The idea that my own son Thomas was discussing moving me out of my home, selling the house James and I had shared for decades, felt like a betrayal of the highest order. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been letting them control me for far too long. I looked at Michael, who sat across from me, his eyes filled with concern, but also a quiet understanding. "Grandma," he said softly, "are you okay?" I forced a smile, but inside I was unraveling. My home, my life, everything I'd worked so hard for was now a commodity in their eyes. I had been so blind to it all. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I finally said, my voice steady. I need some time to think." Michael nodded, and for the first time I felt a wave of gratitude for him. Unlike his parents, he hadn't fallen into the trap of entitlement. He didn't see me as an ATM or a burden to be moved out of the way. He saw me for who I truly was. I knew then that I had to take control. For years, I had been living for others, catering to their needs, fulfilling their desires, all while pushing my own wants and needs aside. But that had to stop. It was time to take back my life, to stop being the silent giver and start becoming the woman I used to be. The woman James had loved. The woman who deserved respect. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice more determined than it had been in years. "It's time for some changes." Michael looked at me with a mixture of surprise and relief. "What kind of changes?" "I'm not sure yet," I replied, taking a deep breath. "But I know I won't be bullied into giving them everything they ask for anymore. I'm going to start making my own decisions." Michael smiled a small, proud smile. "You've got this, Grandma? I know you do." That evening, after Michael left, I sat in the quiet of my home, reflecting on everything I had learned over the past few days. The sting of the name tag, the conversation about my house, the endless requests for money, it had all been leading to this moment. And in that moment, I realized something that James had known all along. I had allowed myself to be treated as if my only value was in what I could provide for others. But that wasn't who I was. I had spent too many years being James's wife, then Thomas's mother, then Emily's grandmother. But who was Eleanor? Who was I, outside of my roles as a caretaker, a giver, a silent presence? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to be silent anymore. The next morning, I called Martin Reynolds. "Martin," I said when he answered, "I need to know everything, not just the codicil. I need to understand what James left me, everything he planned. I want to know it all." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Of course," Eleanor Martin replied. "I'll be happy to go over everything with you. Let's meet this afternoon." 3 hours later, I sat across from Martin in his office, a place I had visited countless times with James. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't just the widow of a man who had built a fortune. This time, I was the one in charge. As Martin laid out the details of James's estate, I could feel the weight of his words. James had been far wealthier than I had realized. He had built several businesses over the years, carefully managing investments that had allowed him to weather even the worst economic downturns. His wealth had been substantial, and it was now mine. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the control. The power James had left me, knowing that I would need it one day to protect myself. "This is more than I ever imagined," I whispered, absorbing the full extent of what James had built. Martin nodded. James was a private man when it came to money. He didn't believe in flaunting wealth, but he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. As he spoke, I could feel the weight of his words. James had always been protective of me, but he hadn't wanted to spoil me. He wanted me to stand on my own 2 feet, to have the strength to face the challenges that life would throw at me. But somewhere along the way, I had lost that strength. I had let others take control. I had allowed my family to dictate the terms of my life. But not anymore. "What about the codicil?" I asked, my voice firm. "What happens if I want to enforce it?" Martin leaned forward, looking me in the eye. "The codicil is clear. Any descendant who publicly humiliates you or attempts to control your finances or home forfeit their inheritance." I felt a shiver run through me. This wasn't just a document, it was my shield, my weapon. Then I will enforce it, I said, my voice steady, but not yet. I need to see how far they'll go. Martin nodded, understanding. I'll be here when you're ready. I left Martin's office, feeling a strange sense of calm. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't just going to react to what was happening around me. I was going to make my own decisions on my own terms. And if my family wanted to continue treating me like a pawn in their game, I would let them. But they would no longer have the power to control me. The days following my conversation with Martin were filled with quiet reflection. I began to look at my family through a different lens, noticing things I had overlooked for years. I had always been so eager to help, so desperate to maintain the peace, that I had ignored the subtle shifts in behavior, the growing sense of entitlement. I thought back to the days after James passed. Thomas and Sophia's sudden interest in my finances wasn't as innocent as it seemed. It was all a part of the pattern I had allowed to take shape. I had been generous, too generous, and they had come to expect it. But now I saw that my contributions were never seen as acts of love. They were transactions. They viewed me as a resource, not a mother or a grandmother. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. The anger wasn't just about the money, it was about respect, or rather, the lack of it. I had allowed them to take advantage of my kindness, thinking that family would always act in good faith. But I had been wrong. I spent the next few days in silence, pulling back from the world around me. I needed to think to make sense of everything that had happened. Slowly, I began to reclaim the pieces of myself I had lost. I took long walks in the garden, letting the fresh air clear my mind. I spent time with Michael, who had become a steady presence in my life. His visits brought me comfort, but they also reminded me of the family I had once hoped for, the family I thought I had. Michael had always been different. He wasn't driven by the same hunger for wealth that Thomas and Sophia had. He understood the importance of genuine connection. That made all the difference. One evening after dinner, I sat down with Michael in the living room. I could feel the weight of the conversation we were about to have. It had been brewing for weeks. I've been thinking, I began, my voice steady but low. I need to make some changes. I can't keep living the way I have been. Michael turned to me, his expression serious. What do you mean, Grandma? I've been allowing them, Thomas and Sophia, to dictate my life for far too long, I said. I let them take advantage of me. And it stops now. Michael nodded, his face softening with understanding. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Grandma. You've given them enough. I know, I replied, my voice filled with resolve. But it's not just about the money. It's about control. I've given them everything, and they've taken it without hesitation. But I've had enough. I paused, looking at him with determination. I'm going to stop being their bank. I'm going to stop letting them treat me like I owe them everything. I'm going to take control of my life. Michael smiled, the pride in his eyes evident. That's what I've been hoping you'd do. The next day, I met with Martin again. This time I was ready. I wasn't just going to sit back and let things unfold as they had before. I was going to take action. I want to be clear, Martin, I said, looking him in the eye. I'm enforcing the codicil. If Thomas and Sophia want to treat me like a commodity, then they will lose everything. Martin nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the decision. Are you sure you want to go through with it, Eleanor? This will change everything. I'm sure, I said, my voice unwavering. I've spent my life being what they wanted me to be. Now it's time for me to be who I am. Martin didn't hesitate. Then we'll begin the process. But know this, once you take this step, there's no turning back. The estate will be redistributed. There will be no more room for manipulation. I'm ready, I replied. I've made my peace with it. That afternoon, I found myself in a quiet corner of the house, staring out at the garden. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The decision had been hard, but it was also liberating. I was finally doing something for me. I wasn't living to please others anymore. I was living for myself, and that was enough. Later that evening, Thomas and Sophia came over for dinner. They were as charming as always, their smiles wide and their voices full of compliments. But I could sense the undercurrent of tension. They had no idea what was coming. Over dinner, they spoke about everything from the wedding to their plans for the future. But all I could think about was how much had changed, how they had changed, how I had changed. After dinner, as we were sitting in the living room, I felt the moment arrive. So Mom Thomas began his voice casual. Have you thought about our offer regarding your house? I felt a rush of anger bubble up inside me, but I controlled it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I was ready. No, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm not moving, and I'm not selling my house. I don't need your help. Sophia glanced at Thomas, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. You don't need to be so stubborn, Eleanor Thomas said, trying to soften his tone. We're just looking out for you. This house is too big for one person. I know what I need, I replied, standing up. And what I don't need is you telling me what's best for me. The tension in the room was palpable. For a moment, Thomas and Sophia just sat there, their eyes darting between each other, unsure of how to proceed. They had been so used to getting their way, so used to me being the one to bend, but not anymore. I'm not going to be manipulated any longer, I said quietly but firmly. I've been far too accommodating, far too generous. But it ends now. If you want to continue asking for more, you'll need to look somewhere else. There was a long pause. The weight of my words settling in. I could see it in their faces. They didn't know how to react. They had never seen me like this before. They weren't used to me standing my ground. Sophia, ever the master of playing the innocent, tried to smooth things over with a forced smile. Come on, Eleanor, don't be like that. We're just trying to help. We want what's best for you. I looked at her, no longer the woman who had always been quick to offer assistance. I was different now. Stronger. You want what's best for me? I asked, my voice low. Then stop treating me like an ATM. Stop acting like I'm just here to give. You've been taking from me for years, and it's time to stop. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mom, don't make a scene. We're just looking out for you. We only want what's best for the family. I could feel the old familiar tug to appease them, to keep the peace. But I refused to let it take hold. The family, or are you just looking out for yourselves? Because all I've seen from you two is selfishness. Every time you've come to me, it's been because you wanted something. There was a long silence as I stood there, my heart racing. I had never spoken to them this way before. They had always been my family, and I had always been willing to give. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I couldn't be. I think it's time for me to start making my own decisions. I continued, my voice steady. I've been living my life for everyone else, and now I'm living it for me. You're going to have to respect that. Later that evening, as they left, their faces were masks of frustration and disbelief. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out how to regain control. But it was too late. I had already made my decision. I was done being the family's wallet. I was done being the person everyone turned to when they needed something. I had to stand up for myself, for my own happiness, and I knew that this was the first step in reclaiming the life I had lost. As they drove off, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The house felt quieter somehow, but in the best way, the kind of quiet that comes when you finally breathe freely after holding your breath for far too long. The next day, I met with Martin again. It was time to take the next step. I'm ready, I told him. Let's do it. I'm enforcing the codicil. I've had enough. Martin nodded, his expression serious. Are you sure, Eleanor? Once you do this, there's no going back. I'm sure, I replied, my voice unwavering. I want them to understand that I won't be pushed around anymore. They need to see that I'm not a source of endless money. I'm a person. And I deserve respect. Martin smiled faintly, a look of approval in his eyes. I'll start the process. It may take some time, but you'll get what you deserve, and so will they. Over the next few weeks, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I started taking control of everything. My finances, my life, my future. I enrolled in a painting class at the community center. It was something I had always wanted to do, but had never found the time for. I began to reconnect with old friends and make new ones. I even took a few small trips just to explore, just to remind myself that there was more to life than what I had been living. And through it all, Michael was there. He visited often, checking in on me, bringing me coffee, and listening to my thoughts. He was the one person in my family who truly understood me. He never saw me as a resource, as someone to exploit. He just saw me as his grandmother. I'm so proud of you, Grandma, he said one evening, sitting at the kitchen table with me. You're finally taking control. I'm finally living for me, I said, smiling at him. It's about time. The shift in my life became more apparent as the weeks went by. I was no longer the silent, passive person I had been. I had become someone who stood firm in her decisions, who no longer felt guilty for saying no. And then just as I was beginning to find my footing, Thomas and Sophia came around again. But this time, they weren't as sure of themselves. The game had changed, and they knew it. You've made your point, Eleanor, Thomas said one afternoon, his voice tense. But this has gone too far. You're cutting us out. I'm not cutting anyone out, I replied calmly. But I am cutting out the manipulation. The constant demands, the constant taking, those days are over. If you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be based on respect, not what I can give you. Sophia sat silently beside him, her face a mask of frustration. She didn't like this new version of me. But I could see in their eyes that they knew they had pushed too far. This isn't over, you know, Thomas said, standing up abruptly. I know, I said quietly, meeting his gaze. But it's over for me. A few days later, Thomas and Sophia invited me to a family brunch at a country club, a classic attempt to reassert control, no doubt. I debated whether to attend. On one hand, I knew it was their way of trying to smooth things over, to regain some semblance of normalcy. On the other hand, I had nothing left to prove to them. Still, curiosity got the best of me. I wanted to see if the name tag incident was just a one-off, or if their behavior truly had reached a breaking point. When I arrived at the Oak Ridge Country Club, I was dressed simply but elegantly in a cream-colored pantsuit, one of the few outfits James had always said made me look regal. As I entered the private dining room, I noticed familiar faces, some from the wedding, some from Robert's old circle of friends, and of course, Thomas and Sophia. Mom, over here, Thomas called from the head table, waving at me as if everything was perfectly fine. Sophia, radiant as ever in her designer dress, leaned in and gave me an air kiss. Eleanor, you look nice, she said, her voice dripping with surprise. We saved you a seat right here. I sat down at the table next to strangers, Mark's parents, Bill and Martha Anderson, who were both cordial but clearly unfamiliar with me. It felt strange, like I didn't belong. The brunch was as expected, full of forced pleasantries. Pamela, ever the hostess, clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. We want to thank everyone for coming today, she began, her smile too bright to be genuine. And of course, a special thank you to Grandma Eleanor, who has been so incredibly generous. I froze my coffee cup halfway to my lips. Here it came, the moment I had been dreading. In fact, Pamela continued, we have an exciting announcement. Grandma Eleanor will be funding Jennifer and Mark's dream honeymoon to Bali. There was a smattering of applause, and I could feel every eye in the room shift toward me. My stomach churned as I set my coffee down. My mind was racing. I hadn't agreed to this. I hadn't promised them anything. "This is the first I'm hearing of it," I said evenly, not allowing my voice to waver. An awkward silence fell over the table. Jennifer, sitting across from me, looked confused. Then embarrassment flickered across her face as she realized the situation was spiraling. "Well, we discussed it yesterday," Pamela said, her laugh hollow. "Remember, you said you'd think about it." "Yes, I did say that," I replied, my voice calm but firm, "and I'm still thinking." Thomas, sensing the growing tension, leaned over, speaking in a stage whisper, clearly meant to be heard by everyone. "Mom, don't make a scene. We've already told them they can book the trip." I looked directly at him, my hands steady, but my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't recall agreeing to pay for a honeymoon in Bali," I said, raising my voice just enough for the entire table to hear. In fact, I believe Mark's parents were supposed to cover this expense. Mark's father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "There have been some business setbacks," he muttered, trying to salvage the situation. "I understand," I said, offering him a forced smile. "These things happen. But I think it's inappropriate to publicly volunteer someone else's money without their agreement, don't you?" The room went silent. Pamela's face flushed a deep red and Thomas's expression hardened. The tension was palpable, but I wasn't done. "If Jennifer and Mark want a honeymoon in Bali," I continued, "they can save for it like most young couples do. If you and Sophia want a bigger house, then you can work for it." The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. Richard, who had been silent up until now, let out an exasperated sigh. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin as he hissed, "Mom, you're embarrassing us." I yanked my arm away, a sharp spark of anger flashing through me. "No, Richard," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've embarrassed yourselves." Jennifer and Mark quickly excused themselves, leaving the table awkwardly. The other guests shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable, but I didn't care. This was my moment, the one I had been waiting for. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. "Jennifer, Mark, I wish you both every happiness. I'd be happy to contribute to a reasonable honeymoon, but I will discuss that with you privately." As I turned to leave, Michael, who had been sitting quietly at the table, stood up with me. "I'll walk you out, Grandma," he said, his voice calm and strong. In the lobby, away from prying eyes, I let the composure I had been holding slip. My hands trembled as I reached for my car keys, my chest tight with emotion. "Are you okay to drive?" Michael asked gently, his concern evident. "I'm fine," I said, taking a deep breath, just a little shaken. "You should be proud of yourself," Michael said, offering a soft smile. That took courage. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, I saw so much of James in him. The same quiet strength, the same unwavering support. He was the one bright spot in a family that had seemed to slip further and further away from the values I had tried to instill. "Would you like to come over for dinner tonight?" I asked impulsively. "I'd like that," he replied, his smile widening. As we walked to the car, I realized that, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I had taken control. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The following weeks were filled with a strange kind of quiet. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. The anger I had once felt was fading, replaced by a sense of peace and clarity. I no longer felt like I was just going through the motions for the sake of others. I was living for myself, making decisions based on my own desires and needs. But of course, Thomas and Sophia weren't done with me yet. They never gave up easily. The phone call started again, but this time I didn't answer. They left messages, but I didn't return them. Their texts were full of passive-aggressive remarks, their tone growing more desperate as the days went by. They were used to getting what they wanted from me, but now they were beginning to realize that I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I had no intention of letting them off the hook, not after everything they had put me through. One afternoon, Martin called. "Eleanor, he said when I picked up. "I've been reviewing everything, and we're ready to proceed with the enforcement of the codicil. But I wanted to make sure you were still certain about this." "I'm sure," I replied without hesitation. "It's time for them to face the consequences of their actions." The codicil James had added to his will was clear: any descendant who publicly humiliated me or treated me with disrespect would forfeit their entire share of his inheritance. The name tag incident at the wedding, the public humiliation at the brunch, the constant demands for money, it all counted. I had made my decision and I wasn't turning back. A few days later, I sat in Martin's office, the weight of the decision still heavy on my mind. But there was no turning back now. I could feel the change, not just in my family, but in myself as well. I was no longer the woman who allowed herself to be manipulated. I had found my voice. "This is a serious step," Martin said, looking at me with a mixture of respect and caution. "Once we proceed, it will be done. The estate will be redistributed, and there will be no more room for manipulation. Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready," I replied, my voice steady. "I've lived my whole life, letting them control me, letting them take what they wanted. It's time for me to take control of my own future." Martin nodded. "We'll proceed then. I'll begin the process immediately." The days following that conversation were a blur. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and guilt. There was a part of me that wished I didn't have to go this far, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no other choice. Thomas and Sophia had made it clear they didn't respect me, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, not as a person. They had treated me like an object, something to be used for their own benefit. But that was over now. One evening, a few weeks later, I received a letter from Martin. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Inside, there was an official notice stating that the codicil had been enforced and that Thomas and Sophia's share of James's estate would be forfeited. The estate would now be redistributed according to James's wishes. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. But there was something else, too. A sense of sadness. I had hoped for so long that things would be different. I had hoped that my family would treat me with love and respect, not for what I could give them, but because they cared about me. But that wasn't the case. And now there was no going back. Later that evening, as I was sitting in the quiet of my living room, I received a call from Thomas. "Mom," his voice was tight, almost pleading. "We need to talk." I let the phone ring for a moment before I answered. "What do you want, Thomas?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice low. I know we've been wrong, but we're family. This is tearing us apart." I could hear the desperation in his voice, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered everything, the name tag, the constant demands, the way they had treated me. "Family?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. "Is that what this is about, Thomas? Or is it about money? Because that's what it feels like to me. You've never treated me like family. You've treated me like a wallet." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I've made my decision," I said, my voice unwavering, "and I'm not going to change it. If you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be based on respect, not money, not manipulation." Thomas didn't respond right away. I could hear the sounds of him shifting on the other end of the phone, but I didn't care. I had said my piece, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. "I hope you understand," I said quietly, my resolve strengthening. "This isn't just about money. This is about me finally standing up for myself, and I'm not going to back down." That night, as I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, I felt a strange kind of peace wash over me. I had finally done it. I had taken control. I had stood up for myself, and I was no longer afraid of what they might think of me. It had been a long road to get here, but I was finally free. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. A few weeks after I had enforced the codicil, things began to settle into a new routine. The heavy burden I had been carrying for so long of constantly trying to please Thomas and Sophia had lifted. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could truly breathe. I no longer had to keep up the facade of being the good, quiet, accommodating mother and grandmother. I could live for myself. I continued with my new routines. I took long walks around the garden, enjoying the peace of my home. I joined the local community center's art class, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the time for. My paintings were simple but full of live flowers, trees, sunsets, everything that made me feel connected to the world again. James would have been proud of me. He always believed in my talents, even when I doubted them. But it wasn't just the art. It was everything. The small moments waking up without feeling the weight of expectations, enjoying a quiet cup of tea in the morning, spending time with Michael, who seemed to understand me better than anyone else. One afternoon, as I was finishing a painting of the garden outside, Michael came by for a visit. His face lit up when he saw what I had been working on. "Grandma, this is amazing. You're really talented," he said, sitting down next to me. "I've been practicing," I replied, trying to suppress a smile. James always told me I had an eye for color. Guess it's finally time to prove him right. He laughed softly. "I think you've already proven it, Grandma." We spent the next few hours together discussing the future and all the things Michael was planning for his bookstore. I was excited for him. His dream was coming together beautifully, and I was glad to be able to support him in any way I could. In a way, he was like a breath of fresh air in the middle of all the chaos with Thomas and Sophia. Michael didn't want anything from me except my love and encouragement, and that was all I needed to give. But as with all things, the calm was not to last forever. It wasn't long before the calls from Thomas and Sophia began again. They had been trying to manipulate their way back into my life, desperate to get me to change my mind about the inheritance. I ignored every message, every call. I wasn't interested in playing their game anymore. Then came the unexpected, a letter from Jennifer. She had been quiet ever since the events at the wedding, and I hadn't heard much from her aside from the occasional update through Michael. I opened the letter carefully, wondering what it could say. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, I wanted to reach out to you, and I hope you'll take the time to hear me out. First, I want to apologize. I should have said something at the wedding about the name tag, about the way everyone was treating you. It wasn't right, and I'm deeply sorry. I allowed myself to be caught up in the excitement of everything and didn't realize how much it was hurting you. I want you to know that I love you, and I respect you more than words can express. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. Please, let's talk when you're ready. Love, Jennifer." I set the letter down slowly, my heart heavy with emotion. I hadn't expected this. I had expected more from Thomas and Sophia, but not from Jennifer. She had always been the one to follow the crowd, to go along with whatever they said. But now it seemed like she was truly trying to make amends. I thought about it for a long time. I had always wanted my family to be whole, to be the kind of family where love and respect came first. But that kind of change didn't happen overnight. Jennifer had a lot to learn, just as I had. A week later, I agreed to meet Jennifer for lunch. She was nervous, I could tell. When we sat down at the cafe, she didn't immediately speak. Instead, she looked down at her hands, twisting them together in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot, Grandma," she finally said. "About everything. About the way we've treated you, about the way I've treated you. I've been selfish. I'm sorry." I studied her, searching for signs of sincerity. What I saw in her eyes was genuine. She wasn't just apologizing to get something from me. She was apologizing because she truly understood now. The weight of her words settled between us, and I felt something shift. "I never wanted to hurt you," Jennifer continued, her voice trembling slightly. "And I never realized how much I was taking from you, how much I was taking you for granted. I understand now. I understand that you've been giving for so long, and it's not fair." I reached across the table and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch. "Jennifer, it's not about the money. It's about respect. It's about being treated like a person, not just a source of income." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. I've learned that the hard way. I hope I can make things right with you." I squeezed her hand. "I'm glad to hear you say that. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to give you that time. And I hope you'll be able to show me, not just tell me that you've changed." Jennifer smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I will. I promise." As the weeks passed, I saw a change in Jennifer. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying. And that was all I could ask for. We began to rebuild our relationship one conversation at a time, and I found that it was easier than I had thought. She genuinely wanted to do better. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could trust her again. Meanwhile, things with Thomas and Sophia remained tense. They continued to try to manipulate me, but it was different now. I was no longer afraid to stand my ground. I no longer felt the need to appease them, to keep the peace at the cost of my own happiness. The boundaries I had set were firm, and I wasn't going to let them cross them again. In the months that followed, I found peace in the small moments. I continued to focus on my art, my relationship with Michael, and the new friendships I was forming. My home, once a place of tension and manipulation, had become my sanctuary again. And when Jennifer came to visit with her new baby in tow, I felt a sense of completeness. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. My family, the part that truly mattered, was starting to heal. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 1 year later, I stood in the doorway of Chapter 1, Michael's bookstore. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating shelves lined with carefully curated books. The smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the counter where Emma, Michael's girlfriend, was busy serving pastries and locally roasted coffee beans. It was a cozy, welcoming space, and I could see Michael's hard work, his dreams, all taking shape before my eyes. The store had been his dream for years, and now it was becoming a reality. I had supported him in whatever way I could, using part of my inheritance to help him with the startup costs. It was the first time in a long while that I had felt truly proud of the way I was using my resources, not just to fund someone else's wants, but to support something meaningful. I walked deeper into the store, past the shelves, past the display tables, my heart swelling with pride. Michael had done it. He had built something from the ground up, a place that would not only serve the community, but also stand as a testament to his hard work and passion. And I had been there to help him, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. "Grandma." I heard a familiar voice call out from behind the counter. I turned around to see Jennifer walking through the door, pushing a stroller. Her daughter Roberta, named after her grandfather, was fast asleep in the stroller. I smiled at the sight of my granddaughter. She had changed so much in the past year, and I could see the difference in her eyes now. She wasn't the same person she had been. And as she walked toward me, I realized that I wasn't the same person either. "I didn't know you'd be here today," Jennifer said, settling down at a small table with Roberta. She gently adjusted the baby in her stroller before looking up at me. "Just dropping off some new bookmarks I painted," I said, bending down to admire the baby. "Hello, little one," I whispered, smiling at the baby's peaceful face. It felt surreal to me. This was the future, this small new life, the love between Jennifer and her family and Michael's bookstore. This was the kind of family I had always dreamed of having. Not perfect, but real. a family built on trust, respect, and genuine care for one another. The healing was slow, but it was happening, and that was enough for me. "How's everything?" I asked, pulling up a chair next to Jennifer. She sighed, her shoulders relaxed. "It's better. We've been talking more, Michael and I. He's been so supportive of me, helping me figure out what I want, what's important to me. And Roberta, she's been a light in my life. I feel like everything is changing in a good way." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about family, about love, about rebuilding what had been broken and finding new ways to connect. "I'm proud of you, Jennifer," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've come so far, and I'm here for you always." She smiled back at me, her eyes bright. "Thank you, Grandma, for everything." Later that afternoon, as we sat together, chatting about books and life, I thought back on everything that had happened over the past year. The struggles, the confrontations, the painful realizations. It had all led me here to this moment. I had been through so much, and I had come out the other side stronger, more sure of myself. And when I looked around the bookstore, watching Michael interact with the customers, I realized that this was my new reality. A reality where I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. 6 months later, Michael's bookstore was flourishing. He had added more community programs, literacy tutoring for adults, writing workshops for teens. It wasn't just a bookstore anymore. It was a space for the community to come together to learn to grow. And I was a part of it. I helped run the story time for children, teaching them the joys of reading and creativity. I even started selling a few of my paintings at the store. It was a small, simple life, but it was mine. It was everything I had worked for. Thomas and Sophia, meanwhile, had gone their separate ways. They had tried to fight the codicil in court, but they had lost. They had moved to Florida, away from me, away from everything we once had. And although part of me mourned the loss of the family I had once known, I also realized that it was better this way. The price of peace had been steep, but it was worth it. As the year continued, I grew closer to Michael and Jennifer and even Roberta. The relationship with my son Thomas was distant, but I didn't mind anymore. I had finally learned to put my own needs first. I had learned that love and respect had to go both ways. And with that lesson, I had found my peace. One evening, as I was sitting in the cozy living room of my house, my home, the place where so many memories were made, the place where I had finally reclaimed my independence, I received a letter from Jennifer. It was a simple note, but it made my heart swell. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, I just wanted to tell you how much I love you. I'm so thankful for everything you've done for me, for Roberta, and for all of us. I know things haven't been easy, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, always. With all my love, Jennifer." I folded the letter, carefully tucking it into a drawer. It was one more step in the healing process. One more sign that things were finally getting back to where they should have been. And so here I am, a year after everything changed. A year after I took back control of my life. It's not perfect. Life never is, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm at peace with that. I look at the life I've built now, and I know that no matter what happens, I will always have the strength to face it. I have my family, those who truly care about me, and I have my independence. That's more than enough. For the first time in a long time, I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be.